The helicopter door slammed shut behind me. My stomach lurched before we even lifted off. A stranger's hand found mine in the dark. "Breathe," she said. "I've got you." 6 months later. That same hand would break my heart. Or maybe it would save my life. Either way. Nothing about that day was an accident. My name is Emma Whitfield, 29 years old, a middle school art teacher living in a small town outside Missoula, Montana. I had spent my whole life being careful, quiet, and agreeable, until the day a helicopter pilot named Jordan Reyes changed everything I thought I wanted. My sister Claire booked the helicopter tour for her bachelorette weekend, insisting I needed to get out of my shell before turning 30 that spring. I hated flying, though I'd never told anyone the real reason, not even Claire, who thought I simply disliked heights and loud engines. Jordan Reyes walked out in a flight suit, sunglasses pushed up into short dark hair, and introduced herself with a grin that felt unfairly confident. The moment the rotors spun up, my chest tightened and my vision blurred, old memories rising faster than the helicopter itself. I gripped the seat until my knuckles went white, certain everyone could hear my heart slamming against my ribs. Jordan glanced back, read my face in half a second, and reached without asking, wrapping her fingers firmly around mine. "You're safe," she said again, steady and low, like she'd said those exact words to frighten strangers 100 times before. Something in her voice loosened the knot in my throat, and for the first time in years, I actually believed it. By the time we landed, my sister was laughing about my green face, but Jordan was watching me with quiet concern. She asked if I was okay. Really asked. Not the polite kind of asking people do when they want you to say fine. I told her the truth instead. That flying reminded me of losing my older brother in a crash 11 years earlier. Jordan's expression shifted, something private and pained crossing her face before she carefully asked which unit he'd served with. When I said his name, she went still, then quietly told me she had trained under him during her first year flying. That single connection cracked something open between us, and Jordan asked if I'd want to grab coffee before I left town. I said yes before I'd fully decided to, surprising myself with how easily the word left my mouth. We sat in a diner for 3 hours, talking about my brother, her years in the army, and nothing at all. She had a way of listening that made me feel like the only interesting person in the room. I drove back to Missoula alone, replaying her laugh the entire way, annoyed at how much I already missed it. 2 weeks later, I invented an excuse to visit Claire again, and Jordan somehow already knew I'd come see her. She showed up at Claire's porch with 2 coffees, one exactly the way I liked mine, though I'd only mentioned it once. We started talking daily, texts stretching past midnight about nothing important, yet somehow about everything that mattered. Jordan told me she'd been married once, to a man, back when she thought that was the only option available to her. The marriage ended quietly, she said, once she finally admitted to herself what she'd been avoiding for years. I hadn't told her yet that I'd never been brave enough to admit anything like that about myself. Instead, I changed the subject, and she let me. Though her eyes lingered a moment longer than necessary, my students still asked why I smiled at my phone during lunch, and I always claimed it was nothing. Claire noticed too, teasing me about my mysterious helicopter pilot, though she assumed it was harmless small-town flirting. I let her believe that, because the alternative meant explaining feelings I hadn't fully named even to myself. Jordan flew up to Missoula on her day off, landing in a field outside town just to take me to lunch. Watching her climb out of the cockpit, confident and sunlit, I felt something shift permanently inside my chest. We walked along the river afterward, and she reached for my hand the way she had that first frightened day. This time my heart raced for an entirely different reason, one I could no longer pretend not to notice. "I like you, Emma," she said plainly. "No games. No hedging. Just quiet honesty under the afternoon sun." I froze. terrified and thrilled in equal measure. Before finally admitting I felt exactly the same way. Our first kiss happened right there by the water. Careful and soft. Like she was afraid I might disappear. I didn't disappear. Instead I kissed her again, surprising us both with how sure I suddenly felt. For the first time since my brother died. Flying didn't feel like loss. Felt like possibility. We started spending every free weekend together. Splitting the drive between Missoula and her base near Great Falls. Jordan taught me the names of mountain ranges from the air, pointing out ridgelines like old friends she'd known for years. I taught her how to paint, though her horizons always came out crooked, tilted like she was still banking a turn. She met my mother once, introduced simply as my friend Jordan, a lie neither of us corrected. My mother liked her immediately, commenting later how nice it was that I finally had a close friend. I laughed along, swallowing the ache of hearing friend, used to shrink something that felt enormous. Jordan never pushed me to say more than I was ready to, though I saw the patience cost her something. One night she admitted her ex-wife's family had never accepted her, and she worried mine would react the same way. I promised her it would be different, though privately I wasn't sure I believed my own words. We celebrated 6 months together quietly, just the two of us. A home-cooked dinner and cheap champagne on her porch. Jordan gave me a small compass keychain, joking that I'd always find my way back to her. I kept it in my coat pocket, running my thumb over it during long staff meetings at school. My coworkers started asking who kept texting me during lunch, and I finally said, someone special instead of deflecting. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was the closest I'd come to saying it out loud. Jordan flew search and rescue missions on weekdays, and I started dreading the radio silence during bad weather. One stormy night she didn't answer for 6 hours, and I paced my apartment convinced the worst had happened. She finally called near midnight, exhausted but safe, and I burst into tears before she'd even said hello. I didn't know I mattered to someone like that anymore, she admitted quietly, her voice rough with feeling. I told her she mattered more than she knew, and meant it more than I'd meant almost anything. That was the night I finally let myself think the word love, even if I wasn't ready to say it yet. Jordan said it first. One ordinary Tuesday, over grocery bags in her kitchen, like it was the simplest fact in the world. I said it back immediately. No hesitation this time, surprised by how natural the words felt leaving my mouth. For a few months, everything felt suspended in a kind of fragile, private happiness we hadn't yet had to defend. We talked about the future in vague, hopeful terms, careful not to name anything too solid too soon. Jordan mentioned an instructor position opening at a flight school near Missoula, closer to where I lived and worked. She applied quietly, telling only me, saying she wanted a reason to stay in one place for once. I let myself imagine an actual life together, something I hadn't dared imagine with anyone before her. That was exactly when everything around us started to complicate. My father called to say he was retiring, and wanted the whole family together for a milestone birthday dinner. He specifically asked if I was still single, in that tone that meant he already had someone in mind. That someone turned out to be Daniel, his business partner's son, invited to dinner without my knowledge or consent. Daniel was pleasant enough, polite and easy to talk to, which somehow made the whole setup worse. My mother beamed through the entire dinner, clearly hoping this would finally settle me down the way she wanted. I sat there thinking about Jordan the entire time, guilty for enjoying dinner with someone I felt nothing for. Afterward, my mother cornered me in the kitchen, gently suggesting Daniel seemed like exactly what I needed. I almost told her the truth then, the words rising hot in my throat before fear pushed them back down. Instead I said I wasn't ready to date anyone, which felt like both a lie and the truth at once. When I told Jordan about the dinner, she went quiet, then asked carefully if I was ashamed of her. I insisted I wasn't, though the hesitation in my own voice betrayed me before I finished the sentence. You don't have to hide me, she said. But I need to know you're not hiding from yourself either. Her words stung precisely because they were accurate. cutting closer to the truth than I wanted to admit. Meanwhile, Jordan's flight school interview came back positive, and she was offered the instructor position near Missoula. She should have been celebrating, but instead she seemed distracted, distant in a way I couldn't quite place. I later learned her ex-wife, Rachel, had reached out unexpectedly, asking to meet and talk things through. Jordan swore it meant nothing, that Rachel simply wanted closure after years of unresolved guilt between them. So, a small ugly jealousy took root in me, one I wasn't proud of but couldn't quite shake. The school. A coworker saw Jordan drop me off one morning, holding my hand a beat too long at the curb. By lunchtime, quiet whispers had already started circulating through the teacher's lounge, careful but unmistakable in their meaning. The principal, Mr. Halvorsen, called me in for a friendly chat about maintaining a professional image in our conservative district. He never said the word directly, but the implication sat heavy and cold between every carefully chosen sentence. I left his office shaking, terrified of losing the only job I'd ever truly loved doing. I didn't tell Jordan how bad it had gotten, not wanting to hand her more weight to carry. She noticed anyway, because I'd started asking her to park a block away when she picked me up. "Are we a secret now?" she asked one night, her voice careful but unmistakably hurt underneath the calm. I told her it was complicated, that my job and my parents made everything harder than it should be. "It's always complicated," she said quietly, "until the day you decide it isn't anymore." We had our first real fight that night, both of us saying things we didn't fully mean but couldn't take back. She left angry, and I sat alone afterward, wondering if I was choosing fear over the best thing in my life. Rachel called Jordan again the following week, this time asking to meet in person one last time. Jordan agreed, insisting it was purely about closure, though I couldn't help feeling shut out of the decision. I saw them together by accident, at a coffee shop downtown, sitting close, heads bent in quiet conversation. I didn't stay to find out what they were discussing, walking away before either of them noticed me. When Jordan called that night, I didn't pick up, letting my hurt speak louder than my curiosity. She texted eventually, saying Rachel had asked her to try again, and that she'd said no without hesitation. I wanted to believe her completely, but doubt had already found a foothold I couldn't easily dislodge. My mother, sensing distance between me and that helicopter friend, pushed harder for me to see Daniel again. Exhausted and cornered, I agreed to one more dinner, telling myself it would finally end her hopeful questions. Daniel, kind as ever, asked directly if there was someone else, reading something in my distracted expression. I hesitated for a long moment before quietly admitting there was, without naming who that someone was. He nodded, unsurprised, and gently suggested I stop wasting both our time pretending otherwise for my parents' sake. His honesty embarrassed me more than any lecture from my mother ever could have managed. I drove straight to Jordan's apartment afterward, needing to say things I'd been too afraid to say aloud. She opened the door already knowing something had shifted, reading it plainly in my face before I spoke. I told her I was done hiding us, done letting fear write the story of my own life. Relief broke across her face, followed quickly by a caution that told me trust wasn't fully repaired yet. Actions, not promises, she said softly, and I understood exactly what she meant and what it would cost me. We agreed to slow down and rebuild honestly. No more parking blocks away. No more convenient half-truths. I decided it was finally time to tell my parents the truth, on my own terms, before anyone else could. I chose Sunday dinner, the one place our family always gathered, thinking honesty deserved a real table in real time. I had no idea a reporter from the local paper had already started asking questions about our small town's controversial teacher. 2 days before dinner, a local reporter named Craig Dunmore called the school asking about rumors involving me and a female pilot. Someone, I later learned, had tipped him off after seeing Jordan and me at a Missoula restaurant the week before. Mr. Halvorsen called an emergency meeting, visibly rattled, asking what exactly he should tell parents if the story ran. I felt the ground tilt beneath me, everything I'd built threatening to collapse before I'd even told my own family. That night, the article appeared online anyway, framed carefully as a question of values in our small conservative district. My phone exploded with messages, some supportive, many cruel, all of them arriving faster than I could process. My mother called first, voice shaking, asking if the article was true or some kind of horrible mistake. I told her the truth, finally, over the phone instead of at the dinner table I'd planned so carefully. Her silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped, until she finally whispered that she needed time. My father said nothing at all, simply hanging up, which somehow hurt worse than any angry words could have. Claire called next, furious on my behalf, insisting she'd support me no matter what anyone else decided. At school the next morning, several parents had already emailed demanding my immediate suspension pending further investigation. Mr. Halvorsen, caught between district policy and public pressure, placed me on paid leave for everyone's comfort. I sat in my empty classroom that afternoon, packing up personal photos, wondering if I'd ever teach there again. Jordan showed up outside the school, furious on my behalf, ready to confront Craig Dunmore herself if I let her. I asked her not to, terrified that any public defense would only make the story burn hotter and longer. That request created distance between us again, Jordan feeling sidelined at the exact moment I needed her steadiest. You wanted to stop hiding, she reminded me gently. But you're still asking me to disappear when it's hard. I didn't have a good answer. Only fear dressed up as caution, and she saw straight through it. Meanwhile, the flight school where Jordan had been offered the instructor job called with sudden, vague scheduling concerns. She suspected, correctly, that someone on the school board had connected her name to the growing local scandal. Watching her career suffer alongside mine broke something loose in me, guilt curdling into quiet, helpless anger. I told her she should walk away from me, spare herself the fallout I seemed to be dragging everywhere. Don't you dare decide that for me, she snapped, hurt flashing across features usually so carefully controlled. We argued harder than we ever had, both exhausted, both scared, neither one actually wanting the other to leave. She left that night saying she needed space to think, and I let her go without fighting for her. 3 days of silence followed, the longest we'd gone without speaking since the helicopter tour months earlier. My father finally called during that silence, voice stiff, saying he wanted to see me in person. I drove home terrified, certain I was walking into another rejection I wasn't sure I could survive right now. He met me on the porch instead of inside, holding an old photo of my brother in uniform. Your brother told me once, he said slowly, that he had a friend like Jordan, someone brave in ways he admired. I stared at him, confused, until he admitted my brother had written him a letter before his final deployment. In it, my brother had confessed he suspected I might be gay, and asked our father to be gentle if he was ever right. My father had kept that letter for 11 years, too afraid and too proud to ever bring it up himself. Hearing my brother's voice, even secondhand, undid something in me I'd been holding together by sheer will alone. My father admitted he'd been quietly researching the flight instructor Jordan had trained under, and recognized her connection immediately. He said watching me light up around her reminded him painfully of how alive my brother used to seem in the air. It wasn't a full acceptance. Not yet. But it was more honesty than we'd shared in years. I left his house lighter than I'd arrived, though still unsure whether Jordan would forgive my earlier retreat. I called her that night, finally ready to say everything I should have said before she walked away. She didn't pick up, and panic set in fast, old fears whispering that I'd waited one day too long. I drove to her apartment and found it dark. Her car gone. No note explaining where or why. A neighbor mentioned Jordan had left that morning for a job thing, sounding both certain and unhelpfully vague. I called the flight school and learned, heart-sinking, that she'd accepted a different position out of state entirely. Frantic, I called Claire, who admitted Jordan had confided in her the night before, asking her to keep it quiet. Claire finally told me Jordan feared she was becoming the reason my whole life was falling apart publicly. She hadn't left because she stopped loving me. She'd left believing that leaving was somehow the loving thing to do. I got the flight details from Claire and booked myself onto a short commuter flight before I could talk myself out of it. Sitting on that plane, gripping the armrest, I realized flying no longer frightened me the way it once had. What frightened me now was arriving too late, after everything Jordan and I had built together quietly unraveled apart. The airport was small, the kind with one gate and a single baggage carousel. Easy to search but easy to miss someone in too. I spotted her instructor badge first, clipped to a stranger's uniform, before I finally saw Jordan herself across the terminal. She froze when she saw me, surprise and guilt and something softer all crossing her face at once. "You came all this way just to say goodbye?" she asked, voice tight, clearly bracing for exactly that. "I came because goodbye isn't what I want," I said, my voice shaking but finally, completely certain. I told her everything. My father's letter, my brother's suspicion, my mother's silence, my own cowardice finally named out loud. "I was so busy protecting everyone else's comfort," I said, "that I almost let go of the one person who never asked me to." Jordan's composure cracked, tears finally breaking through the careful control she'd worn like armor since the article ran. "I left because I thought I was the problem," she admitted. "Not because I stopped wanting this. Wanting you." "You were never the problem," I said. "Hiding was the problem. And I'm done choosing it over you." A small crowd had gathered near the gate, sensing something real happening, though neither of us noticed anymore. Jordan reached for my hand exactly the way she had that first terrifying day in the helicopter. "If I stay," she said carefully, "it has to be all the way. No more parking blocks away." "All the way," I repeated, meaning it more than I'd meant almost anything I'd ever said before. She kissed me right there in the terminal, unhurried and certain, as if we finally had all the time we needed. A stranger nearby actually applauded, and Jordan laughed against my mouth, startled by the sudden small audience. We called the flight school together and Jordan withdrew her application, choosing to stay and fight for her original job instead. Back home, the district finally cleared me of any wrongdoing, quietly reinstating my position after weeks of parent meetings. Craig Dunmore's follow-up article, oddly, turned more sympathetic, focused instead on outdated policies rather than my personal life. My mother invited us both to dinner, an olive branch offered stiffly but sincerely, over her signature pot roast. She still stumbled over pronouns and questions, but she tried, correcting herself gently instead of retreating into silence. My father showed Jordan the letter my brother had written, watching her read it with careful, quiet reverence. Jordan told him she remembered my brother mentioning a little sister who painted crooked horizons and loved fiercely once she trusted someone. Hearing that detail, something my brother apparently never told me directly, broke my father's composure completely for the first time in years. We sat together afterward. 3 generations of unspoken grief finally allowed some room to breathe out loud. Claire hosted a small gathering the following month, quietly introducing Jordan simply as my sister's girlfriend, without hesitation or apology. Several students, hearing rumors, later told me privately that having an openly gay teacher made them feel braver about themselves. Mr. Halvorsen, to his credit, eventually apologized for how quickly he'd folded under pressure instead of defending me outright. Jordan accepted the local instructor position after all. Once the flight school board quietly reconsidered their earlier hesitation, We moved into a small house together that autumn, close enough to the mountains to see her flight path most evenings. I kept the compass keychain on our new front door, a small daily reminder of how we'd found our way back. Rachel sent one final message, wishing us well, finally sounding like someone who had genuinely found peace of her own. My mother started asking about wedding dates before we'd even discussed them ourselves, which made Jordan laugh harder than I'd heard in months. We didn't rush, choosing instead to build slowly, honestly, without the fear that had shaped our first year together. Some nights I still think about that first helicopter ride. The fear. The nausea. Her hand finding mine in the dark. I understand now that fear and love arrived together that day, tangled so tightly I almost missed the second one entirely. My brother never got to meet Jordan, but I like to believe he would have recognized something familiar in her steadiness. The town didn't change overnight, but pieces of it softened, slowly, the way stubborn things sometimes finally do. I stopped being careful, quiet, and agreeable, choosing instead to be honest, present, and finally, completely myself. Jordan proposed the following spring, mid-flight, over the same mountain range where she'd once calmed my racing heart. I said yes before she'd even finished the question, just like the very first time she'd asked me to trust her. Looking back, I realized the turbulence that first day wasn't just in the air. It was every fear I'd been carrying long before I ever stepped into that helicopter. Jordan Reyes didn't just steady my hands that afternoon. She taught me how to finally hold on to my own life, and I have never once let go since. Then